Welcome to the Fearless Podcast. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. We are excited to have on the show today Jeff from Eden Grow Systems. Hey, Jeff. Welcome to the Fearless Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. Love what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for coming back, Jeff. And so today I wanted to have Jeff on to kind of get a chance to introduce himself. He can kind of tell him his own story about how he, kind of changed his life and direction, and how and why did they start homesteading? What were all these different maybe incidences or occurrences that happened in your life, and you were going in one direction and then you were going in another direction, and now you're adjusting again. And it's just a very interesting, compelling story, and I think it will encourage a lot of people and get people at least thinking, and hopefully provide answers and solutions for others. So Jeff, maybe you can kind of tell us, how did you get where you are right now?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the story, the bottom line up front is that it's faith in Christ. And that is something that a lot of people would say, hey, I have faith in Christ. That's where, but it's really, you're going to see as I tell the story, I think it was about 3 leaps of faith that I had to take, where I felt the Lord tell me I needed to do something. It was going against what I felt I should be doing. And when I took that leap of faith, it opened up a door, and then that door led to another door, and then another door, and that eventually gets me here. So that's the short version of this story. But the story actually begins way back, over 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Sorry, try to remember my age. And I was in high school, and I decided, hey, I want to go to this thing called Running Start. I wasn't a big fan of high school. It's funny how the world today seems like high school of back then, all the things that are happening. But I went to community college, and I was just working, and I got done with community college, got my degree, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to work in retail for the rest of my life. I like doing it. That's what my dad was doing. And then I felt the Lord calling me. He's like, no, I put this passion in you. I want you to be an astronaut. And I'm like, well, that sounds cool. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I really like to do that. In fact, if maybe, if I work hard, I could get people to see Earth from space. This is very naive, I know, but if people could just see the planet we live on, and that we're all part of one big rock here, that maybe, people would be a little nicer to each other, and the world would be a better place. So I remember the day I applied for college. I didn't have very good grades at all because I was young. I partied too much. I was like a C student, and I was trying to get into college to go be an astronaut. My mom and my family helped me out trying to find a university to go to. We found Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is the best aerospace school in the country at the time. And they had a great ROTC program as well. So the path I was going to be on is, go in the Air Force, have them help pay for college, and then, become a test pilot or a test engineer. And that would lead me to the space program, which is one of the major paths that you can take to get there. So I started applying for university, and lo and behold, I got accepted. And I remember the day I got accepted because that same day, I got to call my grandpa. I'm like, I got into college. It was pretty awesome. And then my boss at the time, did you get it?
Dead.
Sweet. Left the blood. You all missed that fly. That fly was a major problem. It's less of a problem today now. I got to get one of those things, man. So that was, and you were hunting it, man. You're like Elmer Fudd there. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting fly. That's awesome. Okay, so where was that? So I was working for a company, Sprint, at the time, Sprint PCS. Cell phones just kind of came out, and they were going to promote me. And my boss called me in, well, I got some good news, for you. We're going to promote you up to regional office. And I'd be making like well over $100,000 when I was, what was I? I was 21.
Mm.
And that's unheard of, right? And I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
well, I got some bad news for you guys. I quit. you
Wow.
know, I'm going to college. So fast forward, I go through college, and then I get into the Air Force, and I'm making a fraction of what I would have been making.
Mhm.
It took me like 10 years after college to catch up with the pay I should have been having.
Yeah.
And all the time, I'm working on top secret satellite programs, aerospace engineer. I get stationed in Los Angeles. I get moved to Washington, D.C. I'm working in the Pentagon, working with one of the three-letter agencies, the NRO. I got to go to the CIA, the NGA, and do all those things. Definitely very interesting how my attitude has changed from then to now. There's a lot of
Mm.
great people working in those
Sure.
areas, real
Sure. Yeah.
patriots who are really doing good stuff. But then you see the organization
Yeah.
overall, and you're
Yeah.
like, not so cool.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm reading The Devil's Chessboard right now. Great book about
Hmm.
Alan Dulles and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
agency and everything. Really eye opener there. So I go through all that stuff. I'm doing all the right things. I'm checking all the boxes, and I'm going up in the Air Force. I'm getting promoted, and I get my package put together to go to test pilot school. Everybody signed off on it, and I got to go get a physical. I go get a physical, and they found out, I have what's called a right bundle branch block in my heart. So every now and then my heart will go into a flutter, and I have
Mhm.
to do some exercises to get it to straighten back out. And then also I had two bulge disc. So
Mm.
when you're competing against the best, it doesn't matter how great you are, because they're just as great. And what they're
Mm.
looking for is those perfect candidates. So I was basically deselected out. I couldn't compete given those things. I couldn't even get into test pilot school with some of those problems. They wouldn't let me do that. So God crushed that dream, and that took me a long time to get over. Which he also did that with engineering, because I was a really good engineer. I loved engineering. I love designing and building and doing the math. I know that sounds crazy, but I really do. And when I got to my first station in Los Angeles, the colonel at the time, he's like, "You will never do engineering. You're going to be a manager. You're going to be a leader. You're not going to be doing engineering." And I was crushed. So because I had this plan, I had a plan,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
these things were going against the plan.
Yeah.
Um, but I stayed the course. So, I had that thing crushed. I had the astronaut thing crushed. And I was like, you know what? I love the Air Force. I'll just stay in the Air Force. And, everyone was telling me, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're aggressive, you're going to be a general. Just keep doing, just do the career thing and keep going. And so, I actually ended up volunteering to go to Iraq.
Mm.
And I was doing, I was trained in information operations. So, PSYOP is another way that usually PSYOP is what people understand when you say IO,
Yeah.
pamphlet dropping, and,
Mhm.
winning wars through information, or what we now call fifth generation warfare.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I was going through, and I was doing school on IO, and then I got deployed. Did 8 months in Baghdad, and boy, towards the end, I had all the packages lined up to be on the course to be a general, because one of the things you have to do is, if you want to be a general, you have to be an executive officer or an aide to a general, because it's like a mentorship program, right? They like,
Mhm.
here's, you get exposed to how the large machine works and how you have to think at that level, um, and what is required in order to be there. So I had all those things checked as well. And then, I'm going to church. There is nothing, I'll tell you, it's cool. When you go to church in Iraq, you have your 9mm on your side, and there is no place safer than walking into a church when
Mm.
everybody is armed.
Yeah.
It is such a cool feeling.
Yeah.
But some of the best church I ever had was actually in Iraq, and we had amazing worship. And it's
Wow.
also cool because you're so, when you go to war, even for me, I wasn't a door knocker. Those guys are amazing, and mass respect to them. I was one of the guys back in headquarters, doing bureaucracy stuff, doing admin. I was the guy helping process the special operations guys' orders for the night. And my general, he is the commanding general for all operations in Iraq. So I got to be a part of a lot of stuff. But when you're there and you hear things dropping, bombs dropping, or the C-RAM, which is the big gun that, takes this stuff out of the sky, and you hear that thing go off, it just you really understand how your life hangs on a thread, and it's like it really is the Lord who he moves you left, he moves you right, he moves you up, down, forward and back. And when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And in that sense, when I was in Iraq, it's just like Israel's time in the desert. Like, some people are like, well, I had to go through the desert before the Lord really spoke to me. I'm like, I'm so stubborn. He had to send me to the literal desert.
Literal desert.
So I can actually hear him. And I started hearing him really very clearly. And he's like, I want you to leave the Air Force and I want you to go home. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that is not what the plan is here. You shut down my dream about being an engineer and an astronaut, and now you're telling me no to the Air Force. Like, how do you know when the voice is from the Lord and you're not just a psychopath? It's because he tells you to do things you don't want to do, right? He is real. The Holy Spirit is real. It's all there. It's all true. So I listen. I finish my deployment. I come back to the States, and I have all my stuff. I drive back across the country, back to Washington, and no job, nothing lined up. And I start applying, and I get a job at a Boeing subsidiary. Not long after that, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this is where the story really picks up as far as where the real Martian and Eden and where we're at now, and how you guys, how we came to meet each other. Is my dad, he was a grocery store manager his whole life. Very good at what he did. His stores were always well organized, beautiful, well taken care of. And he felt really good about what he did because he's like, I provide food to people. I didn't know he had that big of impact on me as far as food provision goes until recently. But the real moral of his story is he felt that working hard every day, even at the expense of family and friends, sometimes he learned those lessons the hard way. Yeah. He felt like that was the right thing to do. And then when you get old enough, you get to retire. And then you can enjoy your life and you can re-engage with relationship. And that was a mistake that he made because 6 months before he was supposed to retire, he was diagnosed.
It's such a common story that you hear over and over again. And it's so easy. I see it. So, well, I mean, that's what I was doing before we relocated. I was working 6 days a week. I owned a company. It owned me. I didn't own it, and it was just work 24/7, and you kind of squeeze the family in. And that was part of one of the decisions that we made. Because people ask me all the time, well, why aren't you just, I get asked every week, well, why don't you just run this thing? And why don't you have your own company and all this stuff? And I said, well, I've done that. And I was rather successful at it, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my family on that altar of success because obviously there's more in life than money or prestige or position or whatever. And, another part of that same coin is some people, and I know because this is the kind of person I am, you're such a workaholic. It's easy to just work 24/7 and look, I'm just trying to provide for my family. You know what I mean? And it's such
easy to justify.
It sounds so noble on the surface. It soothes your conscience, but in reality, like, okay, well, let's examine life by real metrics that matter. Eternity, your relationship with your spouse and your children, and rearing and raising the next generation and investing in them. And it's such an important topic to emphasize because predominantly now in this postmodern society we live in, work and diligence and integrity are all frowned upon. They're all racist terms, actually.
Independence and hard work and dedication. Yeah,
I do apologize for my gross racism.
Yes.
But somehow we manage, and maybe I should write a book.
Yeah,
but
no, I do 2 + 2 = 4, and I understand now that that is actually racist.
That is racist, yeah.
Terrible.
I'm
And you drink
ignorant to
coffee and
how.
wake up early in the morning, so you are definitely racist, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's the world's messed up. So messed up. He's
So
got to be coming back soon, guys. Otherwise, it ain't going to be much for him to come back to.
I certainly hope. I
That's
certainly
very true.
even so, come quickly.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough.
okay, so you realize that your dad had this impact on you with
Yep.
food, and he was kind of like a workaholic, and then he was kind of ready to retire, and then he gets diagnosed. So what
Yeah,
happened?
and in addition to that, he was a huge, outdoorsman. So we would spend time. He lost his first wife because of his work, my mom, and they had, out of all the divorces, I would say they had a good divorce. Not that divorce is a good thing,
Sure.
but what they cared about most was their kids, my sister and I, and they made that very well known. And they loved us very, very much. And they maintained a good civil relationship, and even in towards the end, they were even talking to each other, and my mom had a chance to meet with him and talk at the very end of all things. And my stepmom is amazing, my stepdad is amazing. I had a really good family. But my dad, he was huge into going outdoors, and my mom's side of the family was big into horses and horse shows and farming, cattle raising, dairy farms. And then my dad's was the mountain man, horses, mountain. We go up 21 miles into the way deep forest, and ride horseback in and spend a week there. We called it the high hunt. It was up above a mile, and just amazing time. And I had this integrated into me, these outdoor kind of things, what I say traditional manly things, I guess, traditional provider things. And I love that part of me. But then I was torn because I had this technology, the aerospace, the space side of me, and it felt like these two things were going opposite directions, and I was being pulled apart. And when he died, another thing that he and I spoke about, and that's why when he died, it was really important, is we talked about living off grid. We talked about being able to have a cabin in the woods where we have the animals, raise your own food, solar power, energy, do all these things. And he and I were off and on talking about these things behind the scenes as life was going on. And then when he died, it's like, wow, you know what? I mean, I'm not young. I've got 30 years until I'm his age, roughly, and that's not a lot of time. You guys know, as you get older, time goes faster.
Goes fast.
Yeah.
And so it woke me up, and so I started talking to him. I got married not long after he passed away. He got to meet my wife just once, unfortunately. He got to see the home that the Lord provided for us up in the mountains. It's like as close to perfection. The only thing missing from our place is a little chunk of water. I joke a lot. I'm like, in my heaven, the only thing that's different is there's some water right out that window. Right? Otherwise, everything else just stays the same. I'm content. And so he got to see that through pictures. Anyway, that part was sad. But then what started happening in me is I started reflecting on all these things. And so I think you guys maybe heard this part of the story. So as Christians, we pray every night. I pray with my wife, and I was always saying, and Lord, help those obtain food who do not have any. And you do this enough. Enough. And finally, one day at dinner, I was sitting there and I heard him say, Jeff, you're an engineer. I've given you money. I've given you means. Why don't you go do something about it instead of just coming to me? And that was like that moment of whack, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I start doing some design work. I start taking these ideas that my dad and I are kicking around, my ideas as well, and start integrating them. And I come up with what you saw on the Real Martian channel, which is the habitat, right? This huge 80 by 40 by 22 foot tall building that has it was actually aquaponics and flood and drain system. We're raising rainbow trout. We had an anaerobic digester so we can recycle organics and turn that into methane for power. Also turn that back into nutrient solutions so we can recycle everything. Had solar power. I was working on wind. And then, my neighbor comes over, and I didn't know, we barely knew each other at the time, but we were starting to get to know each other. And he's like, the YouTuber. And he's like, hey, can I come over and YouTube that, record that stuff? And I'm like, sure, of course, it's pretty cool. So he comes over, and you guys might know him. His name is Cody at Wrangler Star. And,
I
I'm
remember watching that video.
I remember that video.
Like
So do I.
when it posted, I remember watching
It's
it.
like,
It was-
what
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
world is that?
Yeah, this guy's crazy. So I'm out there in my, my Carhartt overalls. It's snowing, and he comes in, and the hab was just created, and we got visqueen everywhere trying to keep things warm and keep the humidity right. And the movie The Martian had just come out, and so he's like, man, you're like the real Martian. Boom, and that name stuck, and it was a good one. So then he helps us launch a YouTube channel. It got a lot of attention, and people came over, and now we're sitting, I think we're like 35, 37,000. I forget, subscribers on there, and so we start documenting our journey and the design changes, and people are contributing in the comments. It's like we're designing this as a community and learning things and different ideas and concepts. And then the world really starts to change. And that adds a new dynamic in, is that, I read my Bible every day. I've read it from front to back. I think I'm on the 10th time or whatever. And so I start seeing things that were in biblical prophecy are starting to show up. And I start talking to my wife. I'm like, if we believe what we believe, then people are going to be hungry. It says it right here, the third seal, especially a lot of it. Jesus says it, as well as, here are things that you'll know when the end is coming. You'll see these things: wars, deception, wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, plagues, famine, earthquakes in various places. And I'm like, I really started challenging myself. Like, if you believe what you believe, then these things are going to happen. There's no stopping it. It's the inevitable conclusion of sin, right? And I start going, man, we got to do something here, honey. We got to do something. So we doubled down. We refinanced the house. We put more money into the hab, and we start getting more attention, and we get invited to TEDx. We got a TEDx talk out of it. We got invited to a conference, and at that conference, I meet my now business partner, Bart Womack, and he had started a company called Eden. And he was doing something very similar to what I was doing, smaller scale, inside of a Connex. And he was really good at finance and marketing and campaigning. And I'm really good at running a company and operations and technology development, engineering stuff. So we meet, we talk in the bar with my wife and I, and we're like, hey, let's partner up. So we did. And at this time, I'm still working for a Boeing subsidiary where we do unmanned aerial vehicles, and I was responsible for new product development. And so I continue. I come home and what's that?
Like drones?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So we did the Scan Eagle and the Integrator drone, which was being sold to the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Army, and a whole bunch of foreign countries. And great company doing really cool things. They have their own unique story, but kind of going through some rough times. And so I go and I work there all day long, long corporate hour kind of job. And then I come home. In fact, I was just talking to my wife about this 2 nights ago. I'm like, you remember when I come home and I'd work till midnight, wake up at 5, go back to work, do it all again? And she's like, yeah, I'm glad those days are over. I was like, me too. But so I'm building the hab. I'm doing it on the weekends. I got family helping, doing all this, doing it at night. And I know, shortening the story, the hab ends up collapsing in the snow. I come home. That was a bad day. We got this freak snowstorm where we had 4 feet of snow in 2 days. And it just could not keep up with it at all. So that collapses, and we have to sit and think. I'm like, okay, what is God telling us? Are we supposed to stop? Is this a closed door, or are we doing the right thing? And we're like, we're doing the right thing. Our mission is to help provide sustainable food and energy independence to local communities around the world. Like, we're doing the right thing. So luckily I took insurance out, and we take that money and we double down, and we keep going on faith. And then the big day comes. This is the third leap of faith. And some things were going on at work, and wife and I were talking, and we said, well, if we believe what we believe and we're supposed to be doing this, then I think it's time for me to leave my job. We have savings put away, and we're going to do this full time. So she and I spoke, we prayed, talked to our pastor, talked to our family, talked to our friends. And everyone's basically like, yeah. I mean, my mom wasn't, my mom was like, you need to keep your job. Moms are moms,
That's right.
always want you to be safe.
Mhm.
And so I remember when I told my mom I was going to the fire department, I was a volunteer firefighter. She's like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I am. Shit, my mom's awesome, but she's a loving mom.
Yeah.
And so I take the leap of faith. My wife and I take the leap of faith this time, and we leave a very good paying job, and we join Eden. I'm the chief operations and technology officer, and we start taking all those designs and everything that I did for the Hab, and we redesign it, Hab 2. And I'll try to go faster here. The Hab 2 design was awesome. It was going to be these pods that you can just drop in, and they're hexagonal. They look like it was designed after a honeycomb. In fact, one of my whole design philosophy I have it written up on the board, is I believe God has given us all the answers to our problems. We just have to look to his creation for the answers.
Yeah.
So a lot of inspiration of our technology comes from, people would say nature. I say from God's creation.
And that's a principle of permaculture too. Even though a lot of permaculture designers aren't Christian, but all of the laws and rules of permaculture are pretty much exclusively man interacting with creation and edges, and that's a absolutely observable truth that is self-evident, and your presuppositional position is really what determines how you apply it to
your
yeah,
worldview establishes
your
the
worldview.
perception, which then comes into a application. And that's interesting hearing that. Yeah, I mean, permaculture, you look at it, it's all about balance.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that the inputs and outputs are balanced so that you
Right.
don't have too much of either one. And I've been doing a lot of programming lately, going out on the Real Martian channel about how, I'm grateful for large ag because it helped solve a problem when it first started, but it's changed. It's
Yeah.
metamorphosized into
Mhm.
a very bad thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like
Yeah.
how McDonald's, I think you and I were talking about TDs, how McDonald's started off good. It was two guys who wanted to have a good hamburger, good fries
Yeah.
at a good price,
Yeah.
real fast. Healthy. I mean, by healthy, I don't hamburgers, I mean, by their nature, they're not the healthiest thing on the
Not
planet,
top.
but they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're talking about the ingredients, they wanted the best lettuce, the best
Yeah.
onions, the best pickles, the best beef, the best bread. And they
Mm.
wanted it cheap and fast, and they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
now
then,
that's morphed into this whole russet potato thing where they want this perfect potato
I saw that
that they
video.
have to gas this aphid and then harvest these potatoes. They got to keep them in a covered facility so that they off gas so that when
For
people
6
eat them,
weeks.
they don't
oh
die.
geez, I haven't seen
It's
that
so
one. Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, and it has everything to do with they want their French fries to look absolutely perfect instead of a
Having a
natural
little black.
organic. Yeah, having the little black tubular things in it, and you know what
That's
to do.
crazy. I mean, and that's what happens is that greed kicks in, and it's like,
Yeah.
short version is like you look at the different ways that people think the world should be run. There's two extremes. Capitalism on one, well, there's a lot of them, I should say, but capitalism is a big one, and socialism, communism is the other one. And then there's chaos in there as well. The people who just want to whatever, let it go. But if you look at socialism and communism, I mean, early disciples were in a community together, sharing. When Christ is in charge, that can work. But the
Yep.
problem in the real world is that eventually power corrupts the people who are in charge, and they end up just taking care of themselves and their buddies.
And
And that's
and a
why
lot of socialist communists point to that transitional time in the book of Acts to basically justify socialism and communism and this whole kibbutz idea. But that was one, it was two systems diverging as Jews were saved out of Judaism into Christianity, so all of their Jewish heritage, culture, and all of their family land, they were completely cut off and cut out. So they were completely shunned and cut off from all the things that were rightfully there. So that transition had to happen so that these people just didn't starve to death, And that's why later we read in the epistles, if a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat, he needs to work with his hands that he can give. And, and when we isolate scripture to create some kind of falsely balanced narrative, that's how you end up with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you can see the benefits of it, but then you see what happens in the real world when sin enters the equation, and it won't work. And unfortunately, capitalism, which I think is the better model, and especially in today's world, but it is corrupted by sin as well. And we see that in like the McDonald's story. We see it in the big ag story, is that things that start off solving problems that are real end up through greed is how it ends up changing. Greed enters the equation of I could do more, I can get a better bottom line. What can I do? And all of a sudden your company grows and you're getting a lot more money, and then you start to have power with that money. So you start paying lobbyists, which then start changing rules that make it so that you don't want other people to compete with you. So you start
co-opted by
exactly
the big government and big bureaucracy and the deep state, and they're all interwoven together. And the next thing you know, your venture that was a free market capitalistic venture is now some machination of the beast system.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm like, every day is like, Christ, you just need to come back, like now, let your will be done on earth as in heaven, and come back, Maranatha. We need you here, because both of these ways of doing things, they don't work because of people in the end. And I think that's part of why he gave us the 2,000 years, of grace, the age of the church, is because he wanted it so that I just have this vision in my head of everyone showing up, at the wedding, and everyone's like, whoa, we're here. I mean, you imagine that shock and the awe. I'm like, I keep telling myself, just get on your knees, just get on your knees, just get on your knees, but everyone arrives in heaven, and he's sitting there and he's like, all right, anyone have any questions? I mean, I don't think he would do this, but it's cool to think of. And then there's that one guy who's saved, but he's like, yeah, Lord, how come you didn't, the 2,000 years, and why did you do this? Why didn't you let us try it this way? And God's like, well, actually, that's a great question. And I did let you try it this way. That was back in 1700, and then over here, another person starts, in bravery, hey, Lord, kind of like Abraham. Well, what about this? If there's just one, and the guy says, well, what about this way? And it's like, yeah, that was 1900. Oh, how about this way? Oh, that's back in, 2000 BC. And then you can just see all these people saying, here's all these ways that we think it could have been done. And God's literally sitting there going, yep, I let you try every single one of them. And guess what? In the end, sin is what is the problem. You need me to deal with the sin problem. So I forgot how I got on that track, but we start seeing all this stuff happening in the world. We eject from our job. I'm sole income of the home, and so my wife, and bravery and support, she takes the leap as well. We start doing Eden, and we get Hab 2 all designed. It's going to be awesome. It was designed after the honeycomb, so you could put a whole bunch of them together. And they had their own power. They had atmospheric water generators, so they'd suck water out of the air and fill their tank over time. So you could drop it like dropping something on Mars, and it just starts to take care of itself. And there's a super cool design, and we were hoping to get back to it. But we go to the county because we're like, we got to do this above board. We got to, follow all the rules. This isn't just, building something in our backyard. So we get there, and they're like, this is amazing. And they're like, it's going to take us 6 months to get through the permitting process. And I was like, my wife and I are living on savings. We don't have 6 months. So talk to my business partner, and we're like, okay, well, the plan has been, we're going to do this, stationary version that we call the Hab. And then we'll go to the mobile version, which we call LifePod. So we go out, I find this 54-foot semi-truck trailer. I, convert my design from the stationary version into the mobile design. I start buying parts. We start, whacking on the trailer, cutting parts off, plasma cutting, sawing, and we start modifying this trailer. And then COVID. Wow. COVID happens, and all the investment dollars, everything dries up, and we're like, what do we do now? So we're like, okay, well, God, we started off with this Hab, and then we went mobile version, but inside of the Hab and the mobile version were these things called grow towers, grow walls, and the software that controlled everything. well, let's pivot to that. We have the designs. Let's go ahead and pivot to that. So we start buying parts for just those things. And long story shorter is the grow towers just really accelerate. They just, the software that controls them and the grow towers themselves accelerate beyond the grow wall. And we start focusing on that specifically. And then we get multiple designs. We're now up to our 8th. We're working on our 9th iteration. And the newest one that I haven't shown anybody yet, that's classified GS15 top secret right there. Double secret probation kind of top secret.
Decoder ring.
That's it. It's being worked on out in the ranch barn right now. And we're really excited about it. It's a game changer for us. A lot less expensive to manufacture, so our price will be able to drop and we'll be able to get it to more people.
Cool.
So we get this grow tower put together. We take it to market, and all the experience and everything. We get early adopters, get about 30 people who buy the towers as early adopters, and we're faced with one challenge after the other. You come out of the pandemic, and we have Chinese supply chain problems and the Uyghur issue over there, and it's like we've got to get everything out of China, right? Well, that drives our cost up even more. Like, we don't want to be dependent on Taiwan. We don't want to be dependent on China. Certainly don't agree with what they're doing with the Uyghurs, slave labor, and everything that goes into how they keep their prices so low.
That's what we run into with raising our own beef and selling it is, it's educational because, you have to educate your consumer. Because like with grass-fed, grass-finished beef, if you're going to be able to sell it at a profit so that you can continue to do it, the whole point of profit is that so there's a continuation. Like, it's not a charity, it's not an NGO, it's not the Red Cross, it's not FEMA, and all they do is suck up tax dollars. But so yeah, of course, our beef is probably going to be at least double or triple, right, what you get at the store. But you're going to get the bones wrapped as well for bone broth there. And I believe, like with grass-fed, grass-finished beef, with the bones and the organs, once you make that bone broth, I don't even think you can put a real value on bone broth because of the nutrient dense and all the mineralization you're getting. Another thing that we're going to start looking at, I was listening to Texas Slim interview how with the beef initiative, they're educating everyone on the cuts of beef and all of that stuff. And he's talking about how they used to integrate the organs into like the hamburger, and it just adds so much extra nutritional value. So I think even with our next cow, I'm going to experiment with that. Because one thing that we do, since we're carnivore and everything, we have our butcher up the fat content as high as they can get it. So I think like our beef is like a 60-40, our ground beef. It's so next level incredible. And we grill
That's
it.
That's where all the flavor comes from.
The flavor, and then you're getting all that high percentage of fats for your brain area and for your functionality and tendons and joints. So it's really fascinating how the industrialization, because what happened is the industrialization extracted that all out, lean, there's this low fat.
Well, it's that lobby again. They come in there and they start changing the narrative to help their bottom line. It's like, well, this over here is expensive for us, so let's change the story. Let's change the narrative that we tell. It's like the food pyramid. Like, eat a bunch of cereal every day. That's a great idea. Yeah, nothing but pure carbs.
And what's fascinating,
you should have orange juice every morning. Like, nothing but pure sugar. Okay, great idea.
Yeah, and talk about conspiracies. What's fascinating is they extracted this fat, low fat. Fat is the enemy, even though fat is the benefit and the nutrient dense, right? So they extract the fat. Well, then they take the fat, the tallow, right? And they send it over to biodiesel. So now they're extracting that resource. They're taking it off of our plate, which takes it out of our bodies, which eliminates all of the medicinal properties and the healing properties. And they're outsourcing it. And then they're pumping it into a diesel truck that they have already planned the obsolescence of that. And then that's going to go away. Then they'll extract that resource and put it somewhere else. Meanwhile, the overarching, and this is my whole point of like, when everybody says, well, who's at the top? Is it the Rothschild? No, it's Satan. Like,
it's Satan. Yeah. Like, it's the easiest answer ever. It's so frustrating.
You cannot, like, it cannot be so interrelated. And
no human could do this.
Yeah, the end game is to
never
kill humanity, make it sick, make it immunity on subscription, and all these different things, right? And you're like, wait a minute. So you're trying to tell me that they took the fat out of the meat so they could redirect it into biodiesel to put it in a diesel shipping truck that they've already, planned the obsolescence of that. They're going to eliminate that. And there's the intrinsic transnational benefit that all the sheeple people just are sick and tired, have no energy, they have brain fog. And I'm like, well, yeah. And the only person that can coordinate all that is the prince and the power of the air. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. I have family, and it's like, I just don't understand what's going on. I'm like, it's like we've intellectualized ourselves so far that people just can't understand that 1 + 1 equals 2, right? It's just too complicated now. It's like, no, if you just look around, evil is real. Even Christians, it's like one of the things I have against the Christian church of today, it's almost like we just got to blow that whole thing up. Because in my opinion, and I'm talking about the little C church, right? The 4-wall church. The big C church is the body of Christ, which we all belong to. That church is alive and well and is thriving. The more you persecute it, the better and stronger that thing gets. But the little C church that's out there communicating to people on Sundays, Wednesdays, maybe Thursdays and Mondays, they're not talking about the enemy. Right. And most of the time when I bring it up, well, I'd much rather focus on the positive and on Christ. I'm like, okay, so you're not being a shepherd then. Like, there are literally wolves out there, actually lions. There's a lion who's prowling out there, who's super intelligent, who was there at the beginning, made before us, knows everything beyond what we know, has had 6,000 years to set up the world's most perfect trap. And we're not going to talk about that? Like, your sheep are going to get killed. And the shepherd,
unfortunately, these 501c3 corporations, it's about body bucks and buildings, and we keep it positive. We're Joel Osteen. We just need to help
that guy. Talk about doctrine and demons.
Yeah, everybody's self-esteem, and you can do it, and it's your best life now. I mean, think about your best life now, respective to just current events, and the genetic manipulation that's going on and these transnational corporations. It just doesn't quite fit dovetail with your best life now. Somehow the facts, clash, and there still is a very large cross section of and that's why warning people against heresy is so important, because all this self-worship and self-improvement is just it's an end game. It's designed to ultimately leave you with nothing, because you can't, like, Christ is the answer to absolutely everything. Christ paid the penalty. Christ is all sufficient. Christ did it all. He is the author and he is the finisher, and that's why now in this flesh, right? Do we battle and struggle in the flesh? Yeah. Paul writes about it, right? The things
Absolutely.
I don't that I do.
Thank
So,
God for Paul.
and
a lot of hope in that verse.
In this physical frame, I mean, that's what we have to deal with in the present now. And there's coming a day when we will no longer have that struggle, because
body.
Mortality will become immortality. And we're looking for all that. And then there's some people that get so I don't want to say so focused on that, because that is the most ultimately important thing, but they ignore the rest of this stuff. Like, I know so many pastors that in the sake of their service, they completely ignore their family, and their families are destroyed because they're so busy serving God that they completely ignore. They sacrifice their family on the altar of their supposed service, even though God created the family before he created
well, and the Bible's very clear. You can't have a shepherd who can't take care of their family. I mean,
Correct.
you're going against, the very word. And I think we're seeing that more and more. The Little C Church, I think it has to die. I've never said it out loud, but I think Little C Church has to die, and it's going to come back to people coming together, whether it's like this, or, wherever two or more are gathered, there I am as well, right?
Yeah,
And
my opinion is different in this sense. Christ said that the gates of hell wouldn't prevail against his church, and I do believe that that's a reference to the local church. I think what's happening is it's just it's a sifting, right? And all
the
of these,
separation of the sheep and the goats,
yeah,
kind of thing.
the social club. It's a reckoning of these social clubs that were designed with this veneer of Christianity, this veneer of doctrine, and really it's
Yeah.
just a really nice tax shelter. And you got your good FEMA pastors that are going to tell you to social distance and get genetic manipulation and all these different things for the sake of they'll tell you how being genetically manipulated, like if Jesus was around, he would be genetically manipulated.
Yeah, that guy said that.
Because my grandma and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And I think this is the tribulum. This is the sifting and the separation of the goats and the sheep and the
wheat and the tare.
The chaff. Yep. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I think the separation has definitely begun. I mean, I felt that way. It felt like when the pandemic started that, well, it's like I really started digging in. I love when I first came to Christ, because I wasn't raised in a Christian family, but I read the Bible backward. I read Revelation first, and they tell you you're not supposed to do that. And there's good reasons why. It's like you can't really fully understand it without seeing the whole Bible, and that part's true. But it was what I needed, because it shook me, and it's like, whoa, And at the time, it's like, I want to be one of the 144,000. I don't want to be one of these other folks, And it's like, a lot. Obviously, there's a lot more, and there's a lot of interpretation and all those things in that. But I was young when I read it, and that's how I felt at the time. Now I see it in much larger light, and it's like I just wish that we would. Well, when the pandemic started, I started looking at the seals, and I was like, man, there's so many different doctrines and different things. And what I ended up doing is with my cousin, who's been a believer way longer than I, he was actually praying for me to get saved, and that was answered prayer for him. We read the Bible backwards. So we had a weekend where the girls were going somewhere. He and I got together. We had steak and potatoes and corn on the cob. And we're like, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to read the Bible backwards. So we started with Revelation, and we're like, okay, the great, the 1,000 years and the new earth, new heaven, 1,000-year reign. And okay, the great white throne judgment. And then we just worked our way backwards like a project manager would. Hey, if you're going to build a house, you start with the end in mind. You don't start with the foundation. You start with the picture of where you're going. And then you figure out, the sequence of events of what you can do in serial, what can be done in parallel. You figure out the cost of all those things. The Bible even tells us, have a plan. So don't start a project without a plan, I guess is the right way to say what the Bible says. And so we did that, and we got back to the seals and everything, and a whole bunch of other references. I made this PowerPoint slide that is like just filled with all the biblical references of doing this exercise. And the one rule we had is no doctrine, no pre-beliefs. We're just going to look at what the Bible says, just what the word says. Let the Bible interpret the Bible. And so we get back there, and it just felt like, man, I can't say that the seals have been open, but when the pandemic started, it really felt like something shifted, right? And that first seal, that concept of a spirit that goes out to conquer. And, you can argue, is it Christ? Is it not Christ? The Antichrist, and all these things. But it felt like, it was really something's going on. And I've since come to the point where it's like, I can't tell you one way or the other if the seals are open. But I'll tell you what, those horses, if they're not out, if the first three are out running, then they're in the corral. They've been warmed up, and they got a little bit of sweat on them, and they're ready to go. Because it seems like that's where we're at. And kind of back to...
Yeah, I mean, there's so much... whether you hold a historical premillennial position or, partial preterist or whatever, one thing that is undeniable from my observation and from daily reading of scripture is like we can definitely see there are some incredibly significant parallels, likenesses, foreshadowing, maybe multiple. We got one more fly that we have.
For all
Speaking of
those listening right now, you should see the hunting that is going on. Well, this is a skilled operation.
But you know, that's the one thing that I find fascinating with people in alternative media that are not professing Christians, and they may or may not say, you know, my parents were Christians, I was raised this, but we can absolutely see the truth of scripture in reality unfolding, whether or not whoever's timeline or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, that was always my biggest challenge with every eschatological theory, is when people try to put it on a chart. Like I've never seen a representation of a chart that I could say, oh yeah, you know what, that is the way I see it. Like the marriage supper of the Lamb is here, and which what that does for me, and this is, I think, is the beauty of Revelation. One, we know by studying history that it applies to every century. Like, you know, for example, the Waldenses, they could look at the current pope and they said, that's the man of sin of Revelation. And he was fulfilling those prophecies, you know. And then we've seen these different dictators and how they've you know, fit these types and shadows and roles and models. And that's what makes the Bible so relevant and real for every generation.
It's the living word. Yeah. It's beyond time. It wasn't like you hear the arguments like, well, this was written like Revelation. Of course, it was written during the time of the Roman occupation. John was isolated on an island, so he was really having to write in code.
Yeah,
to people at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes, he did. But the Bible is God's inspired word, and it's not a one and done. You know, I mean, if you're beyond time and you write a book, even if you're writing it through man, you know, it's beyond time. And that's where I'm, you know, with you on that, is like the stuff that was written for them back then. I think the Jews actually have this as one of the ways that they read the Torah is, you know, there's the past interpretation, as in these things occurred in the past. So how does, you know, reading Isaiah apply? How does reading Jeremiah apply? You know, here's the wall that was torn down. Here's Babylon. You know, these are all past things. Then there's the present interpretation. Okay, what does this mean today? Well, Babylon and people turning away from God, and that there's punishment. Okay, and then there's the future, right? The again, this is all beyond time. The Bible applies no matter what you're reading. It applies to past, present, and future.
And it shows that it is a miraculous book that was written by God, that is divinely inspired and divinely preserved. And I mean, who cannot go to the end of Revelation and read about the merchants of the earth living in delicacy, right? And pharmakia, and how
it's like it's all happened.
The beast system, and how they are all of these merchants, you know. And when I see merchants and you read the whole depiction, you clearly see this oligarchical, you know, banker class, elite class, and how they're fully integrated with the beast system. And now what that will do is it will shred and destroy some of these other Americana notions, right, of this whole pre-trib thing and God bless America, this Christian country, when, you know, there was a lot of great Christian godly men involved. John Leland is basically gave us the Bill of Rights. He insisted on a Bill of Rights, right? That these are these evident God-given rights that are evident, that we're going to enumerate, right? Not that we didn't create these rights. These are rights given by God. We're going to enumerate them on paper so that it can be declared and clearly defined and give us a reference point to point back to, so that we can all agree, right? Like, yeah, no, these are God-given rights. We recognize them. So we've enumerated them. We've written them down. And because this whole pandemic thing, right, there was an inordinate, and there has been, especially in America and in China, and in China. Okay. Now you're talking about two supposedly diametrically opposed systems. There's been an inordinate amount of state worship, right? And how many, me growing up and being from the Northeast and then going to seminary in Tennessee and then moving to Texas and all these different things, I personally experienced an inordinate amount of state worship and, Romans 13 and bow the knee to government. And that's the higher power and it's ordained of God. Well, yeah, from your presuppositional position that's based on terrible eisegetic concepts, right, that are completely false because it says that those powers are given you to reward good and to punish evil. Now, as soon as they don't reward good and they don't punish evil, they're de facto, right? And they're outside of their jurisdiction. They no longer have a jurisdiction. So they are no longer in power. They are no longer recognized of God. And, and the other thing that the Bible tells us is that he will use these ungodly, unjustified powers to judge his people and to
Nebuchadnezzar.
And we just watch this over and over again. And it's really undeniable just from being aware and having that perception and reading the Bible for yourself, wanting to know it and understand it and ask for discernment. So it's really, that was
it's like when it's a good rabbit hole though. It's like when my last part on it is like when you look at, I remember reading the Bible and you go through Israel's, fallen kings, right? First and second, you just see this one did evil in the eyes of the Lord and turned away, and they built Asherah poles, and then this one did good and he tore them down, and this one did bad and they put him back up, and tore him down, put him back up, tore him down, put him back up, and you're like, come on, guys, you're like, what's wrong with you? And then you have the revelation, you're like, oh wait, that's me.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, got it. But it's not just me. It also applies to my family, to my local community, to my state, to society overall. And that's exactly what we're seeing as a repeat of the falling away. And this time though.
What's so fascinating about that is, if you go to just before that, the whole kings and judges, right? God's like, the people said, we want a king just like everybody else. That's what we want. And God's like, well, I'm going to give you that.
You should do. Well, he started off with like, no, you don't.
You don't want this. But if you don't. You have a king, he's going to take all your stuff and he's going to take all your women and he's going to steal from you. And that's going to be the deal. No, we want that. Okay. Well, I told you what was going to happen. So here you go.
Yeah. And it's filled with those like, no, you don't. You really don't want that. You really don't want to put your hand on the stove. Okay. Don't put your hand on the stove. No, Daddy, I want to. All right. Don't put your finger in the socket, kid. Yeah, no, it's a lot of learning over and over, but kind of back to our primary story is, I saw these things happening, and that's a key part of, I do think we're in the terminal generation here. I think we saw, Israel stood up in 1948. I just forgot the verse, but the life of a man is 70 to 80 years. Oh, just Hosea, 3:14 or something like that. And
I categorically reject that because I believe that Israel, as a nation state, is just a machination of the UN, and it's part of this whole beast system process. So
I think it's definitely part of the beast system, but I think the creation of the country in a day, I think that one, we'll see.
Right.
We'll see. I think that one is important, but I don't think Israel. So like, it's really, you can help inform me on this one because the hatred of the Jews and replacement theology, I've never really understood. And the reason I don't understand it, I'm not saying you hate it. I'm saying you know more than I do, so you can inform me of this. But I see Israel as that is the primary story. God made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he told them how it was going to be. I don't see him turning his back on the covenant, but I see the people turning their back on God. And I think the modern day Israel was brought back together, seemed to be miraculous, especially when I'm reading the Devil's Chessboard and how all these people were weird.
And
back then.
I used to hold that same position, but as I continued to study, um, it doesn't necessarily call for a replacement theology, but as you study the new covenant, right? That was, there's the mystery of godliness, and then there's the mystery of iniquity. So the thing that we know and understand now is if you start with the Old Testament is exclusively temporal. It's all about lands, real borders, dirt, genetics, who you genetically were, these certain land masses and different things, right? But then, which is why uh, Judaism as a religion rejected and still to this day rejects Messiah because they are looking for a geopolitical insurrection.
Commander of armies.
Right?
Yeah.
And Jesus kept saying, look, hey, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my children would fight, which kind of totally destroys and deflates all this dominionism and Christian nationalism and all this stuff. But simultaneously, we see that even in the Old Testament, we see even in the lineage of Christ, right, where there are Gentiles woven in there, because God clearly shows through the Old Testament and then reveals into the New Testament this mystery of godliness, that God was manifest in the flesh, and that was the all sufficient. And that new covenant was a new and better covenant. And that's where I personally believe, and when you start talking about anti-Semitism and everybody starts to flag you and everything, but I believe that a lot of that, well, the fact that they literally redefined even the word, in the
and they've done some things that are like this. I think I've heard it the best way is that there's trying to walk the line here so that nothing gets flagged. Is there, like in all, there's a good group and there's a bad group. There's a group who is looking and wanting to do what Torah says. They are misguided in the sense that they miss Messiah. And I think the Bible is very clear that they will cry. I'm not coming back until you're all ready to. I'm not quoting exactly here. I don't have this one memorized. But they will weep when they understood that they had pierced him. Not an exact quote. Again, I'm just going with what I can remember here. So I think they are going to turn back. Not all of them. And then the bad group, what I see there, it seems like this is the group that gets more attention, is the ones who are definitely part of the world, that are 100%, helping build the beast system.
Right.
If not, a cornerstone of it.
Yeah. And I believe that this is what convolutes it, because nobody is saying that. Well, some people are. I'm sorry, I take that back. There's this fringe of saying that those people are everything that's wrong with the world, and they're behind everything, which is clearly just not even perceivably true. There isn't in a gigantic faction, and then we can get into the whole Bolshevik Khazarian thing, which these people that are claiming to be who they aren't even genetically who they're claiming to be, and most of them currently occupy the UN nation state, and they're not even genetically, they're imposters. Okay, so it is a very but the interesting thing on a larger social level, right, with like these things like the ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center, they overemphasize all this stuff, and they'll cry racism, and that only benefits and funds their mechanism. Just like, for example, how much welfare we send the UN nation state, right? We send an inordinate amount of welfare, billions of dollars a year. And I think, and that's predicated on some misconstrued verses that I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee, right? When our government has no intention, they have no care for any type of blessing. They certainly don't want to be blessed by God. But yet we predicate this welfare on this concept of some verse that's taken out of context. And that's how we justify that welfare, but don't send hundreds of billions of dollars for a proxy war in the Ukraine, but allow this UN nation state and their Mossad and everything that they have been involved in between 9/11 and everything else. It's a cut. My point is all of the geopolitical stuff is an absolute cover for nefarious things. And
Satan's chessboard.
The people are not their government. Right. Look at us. I mean, look at us. Hey, man, I didn't vote for any of this. We say that all the time. Like, I didn't vote for any of this.
Yeah.
And I don't accuse those people of voting for or wanting what these beast participants want to beast out at,
Yeah, no, I feel that way, especially with, the language I studied when I was going through college was Russian because I wanted to be an astronaut. And, when you study Russian, they didn't offer it at any schools. So I had to pay somebody, it's actually a Ukrainian. And she was my tutor and taught me, and she was cool because she taught me their history, and not just Ukrainian history. We're talking full Russian history. And it's very interesting, because I have people who are former military, friends of mine, and it's still friends, just we're in the military together, I guess is what I meant to say. And their way of seeing Russia is enemy, 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 right? And with what I know and what I've been taught about their history, which is filled with a whole bunch of bad things happening, it's almost like the United States and Russia. If I were to put it in terms that everyone can understand, it's like they're brothers. It's like they're brothers that are competing against each other, and they cut from the same cloth, but
it's a great game.
Different. And the Russian people, if you were to sit down, if you took us, the three of us, and you put us with three of us, but from Russia, I think we would all get along really, really well. I mean, I think we would have a lot to talk about. I think, we would, at the end of the day, I like, a good thing of how do you say vodka in Russian is vodka. And, I sit there and I could have a conversation and relate at a human level with them. But then you come back to the leadership that's in charge, the beast system, and how it's getting us to hate everybody who's not us, right? And
we have a missionary in Russia, and he gets to come back, I think, every 6 months or so. And I've had like in-depth, and he's in Russia, and he's a missionary to the Ukraine. So I get to get like real info from him, and it's exactly that. We all know that this whole Crimea thing is this whole current proxy money milking scheme. It's not even a war, is exclusively about wealth transfer. This has nothing to do with freedom or anything, and it's all an absolute narrative, and it's not. What is really happening has nothing to do with anything that we're told that's happening. And it's just about the death of innocent people is really what it's about. While the bankers and their minion extract wealth, normal, innocent people that completely are not involved, that didn't vote for any of it, they die, and then their wealth is extracted. And that's what's going on here.
I mean, it is really, really sad. And like I said, the devil's chessboard. I mean, I'm reading the book, but the idea is exact. I mean, he's playing 4-dimensional chess, and we can't even visualize that.
Like Donald Trump.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Landmines I'm going to avoid today. And well, yeah, and you see Trump, you see people worshiping the guy. It's like the billboards of like Jesus Trump. I'm like, come on.
Yeah,
it's like, no. And all of them, it's really, really sad to see what's going on. I mean, I'm trying to do more walking, trying to lose weight, de-stress and all that. And I was out there talking to the Lord, and I just seeing the things going on in the world, and it hurts my heart, and I'm not even capable of loving the way he is, but my heart is still like aching for, it's not hatred. It's feeling bad for people who are just either in a situation in life where they just can't wake up because they're just so dependent on the system, and
Yeah.
there's not much hope for them in that sense, which is heartbreaking. You think about that. And then the people who are fighting this war, you know, and seeing the innocent victims that are stuck in and by war, I mean the war, not Russia, Ukraine. I mean the ultimate war, the one war that matters. And and they just have no idea what's going on, and your heart breaks for them. And then you see people just turning away, like the woke mob, and they're just completely overtaken by Baal, Ishtar, and Moloch. And then it's like you just see them, and they have no idea. They're completely oblivious, to what's really going on, and it just hurts your heart. And you know, you wish you can go, I got the firefighter in me.
Yeah, I mean, it should. That's the compassion of Christ, you know, saving some from the fire, you know, on some having compassion, you know, pulling them from the fire. That's one of, they'll know we're Christians by our love. That's one of the indicators, right? That we're Christian and we're compassionate. And, you know, and even though we are Christian and we are compassionate, we should still hate evil and denounce, you know, because the weird thing is well, like this new age Maitreya hippie Willie Nelson Jesus that was Caesar Borgia Jesus, the long hair guy, you know, he's, you know, love is love, and you're supposed to love, and you're supposed to have so much compassion there. You're like, well, you know, Hitler could have went to heaven, you know, maybe at the last second he whatever, you know, not that any of us can send Hitler to hell or heaven, right? But you know, there's this new age hippie Christianity that basically says if you don't have like absolute compassion on everything that's related to humanity, you're being kind of judgy and you're being mean and ugly, which it was never ever like that, and it was never demonstrated that way. I mean, Christ, he braided a whip, right, and he cleaned out his father's house,
Money,
you know.
and that was another one. Sorry to jump in. It was you sit and you look at what, you know, kind of summarizing in one word what you're talking about is that they're pushing 100% tolerance, right? You need to tolerate me doing what I am because I am who I am, you know. And all
I'm not going to tolerate you, but you need to tolerate me.
I mean, they're completely hypocritical. Don't get me wrong. I'm 100% on that bandwagon. But then I started thinking the other day, talking to the Lord again while I was out on my walk, and I was like, but just like socialism or communism or capitalism is what happens if we start doing the, you know, like we do need to not tolerate some things, but the warning there is that can turn into totalitarianism as it's like, okay, well, we stopped, I could just see this happening so easily. Well, we stopped tolerating this. Well, then what Satan will say is, well, why don't you stop tolerating this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
That's why I believe in the law of liberty, you know, and I believe in the liberty of conscience that, you know, and a lot of these dominionists and Christian, what are these new Christian nationalists, you know, they're like, oh no, this needs to be, this needs to be, requires the death penalty and all this stuff. And like, well, that's that. If it's not truly led and run by God, it becomes totalitarianism.
Exactly. That's the conclusion.
It's a different flavor of tyranny and totalitarianism. It's why guys like Calvin and Luther like drowned Baptists, because, you know, they couldn't figure out what baptism was. And so they didn't like the fact that Baptists held, that the Waldenses held to like believers' baptism. And that's what happened. That is the fruit that, and we can historically point to that and say, hey, if you want to legislate morality, right, from a state level, not from a personal level, not from a local church level, you know, if you look at the way God set up everything, it was completely decentralized, right?
Yeah.
And if you look,
you shouldn't have a centralized government that's based on religion of any kind. No, it ends up going bad. When you combine religion and politics with power, it's corrupted almost immediately. We saw that with the Roman Catholic Church.
Right, exactly.
Now again.
Yeah. Compassionate capitalism. Look what the Pope's doing right now. It's the same thing. It's the same thing they've always done. And it always involves communism, socialism, and taking all your money, and he can like sit on a gold throne and like
control the keys to heaven. Even, if
yeah,
you don't pay
he's
this
got this,
penance, then your
right.
loved ones aren't going.
And how much difference is that than your like immune system on demand, right? And well, you got to pay Pfizer. I mean, if you want to have a healthy immune system, it's the same. I mean, it's the same model. It's the Jesuit
It's all
model.
the anti-God concept that Satan's all about. Is let's replace the natural.
You
with
shall
the
be as
supernatural.
gods. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And seeing all those things happen, it just rips your heart out. But then knowing, like, that's why I was jumping at the bit here, is the conclusion of all things. There's only one. We are hosed without Christ as the center of our life. If you put anything else in the center of your life that isn't Christ, then it will lead to bad no matter what. It's the Darth Vader syndrome. It's the evil isn't 100. Evil is always thought of as being 180 degrees away from God, but it's not. One degree away from God is evil. Half a degree, a fraction of a degree, because over time that happens.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing in today's world is good people are turning bad. We're seeing the hardening of hearts of individuals where they swear they're doing good, but in the end, what's happening is they're becoming filled with hate. They just think it's righteous hate. Like, and I'm not talking about, hey, these people over here mutilating kids, you shouldn't be angry. Right. You should be angry about that. That is not what I'm talking about. It's more of the Christian nationalism concept of, this is what it has to be. And if you're not with us, you're against us. And blah, blah, blah,
well,
blah.
I mean, that's the dialectic. And that's what, we've been having these conversations even in our live streams. And we were talking about Trump yesterday, and we got a lot of pushback. And it's because if you're, like with the Maui kids, if they really burn up versus they got trafficked, if you deny that some black ops guy in some spaceship extracted them, during this whole thing, then you don't believe
one
that
of them.
No, that you don't believe that child trafficking. And so like, I need to post links of videos that say, hey, nobody's denying that there's human trafficking. Everybody is completely, unfortunately, not a lot of people are as aware, but the people that are aware, we're completely aware of that human trafficking is going on, and America has directly participated that with Hollyweird and professional sports, and the NFL being the high day of human trafficking. There's a reason why. And that goes right back to this talking about Christ being the center. And I believe, before there was this notion of like, we have to regain the culture, and so we have to make everything like Christianese and like Christian light. And this is how we're going to win the culture back, with being like the world with a Christian flavor or veneer to it. But now I think we're seeing the fruit of that. And we have to be almost, in a large sense, certainly in a pop culture sense, we have to be anti-culture, because
you have to stand the ground. You have to be, you have to be hated for who you are rather than being loved for who you're not. And if you're being fake, how are we supposed to win people over? It's not by whacking them over the head with the Bible. It's by living the word through us. It's about how we are supposed to be treating other people. And people are supposed to see the light of Christ in us and be like, oh, wow, I want some of that.
And that's why we should be honest and call things for what they are, rather than being on some type of team, red team, blue team, or 100% MAGA, whatever these terms even mean. I don't even know what these things mean, but like, we can't, it's so chopped up, and it's so like, well, if it's not this, it's absolutely this. And that doesn't exist anywhere in our daily life.
But it's the narrative that they're pushing. Alice and I were talking about this on an article. We were just did a video a few days ago, and
I know. And me and my wife, me and Faith, we might even do that today. We're going to do a video about that article. It's fascinating, and I want to do that. But
let me know. Let me know when you know. I'd love to watch your guys' take on it and be in the chat with you. I was like, Allison, why are you asking me this? Well, you live out in the country. And I'm like, I'm curious about your, okay, well, let's do it. And I was just seeing it, and it was this idea that they're putting, there's a lot of things I commented on, but the one was very clear, is that they're trying to create division. Exactly. This or this, you're rural or you're urban, and rural is evil and urban is great, and you can flop that.
And
you
that's
can
what
see,
I think is great about what you're doing. You're providing a solution that's rural and urban.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
yeah, well,
And
we get yelled at. It's really interesting because we see that dynamic. I'm actually trying to call Christians out because I got people who are following me on The Real Martian, and they're like, "You're just trying to help these people. They're lost. You should have just, written
that's
them off."
crazy.
I'm
Yeah,
summarizing, right? I'm
yeah,
like, that is the most anti-Christian thing you could
right.
possibly say.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
we're
And
supposed to be taking the blessings we
yeah,
have
yeah.
and helping.
And we
Yeah.
encourage people to relocate all the time, but we're obviously acutely aware of the fact that not everybody can do that. Obviously, of course,
Exactly.
that doesn't mean that I shouldn't encourage them to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Tell
mean,
them the pros, tell them the cons, give
Yeah.
them.
right.
That's what you guys do on your channel is you help
It's just
inform.
it's being balanced and being honest. That's all. And then what you're doing is incredible because you're like, okay, well, maybe they can't. So let's come up with some solutions to help them.
That's right.
Boom.
Let's bring a little bit of rural America into everybody's homes and help feed them.
Let's try. That's all. I mean,
Yeah.
how
And then
great
I get hate from traditional agriculture folks, that love their gardens. And I'm like, one, you guys, I'm so happy that you're gardening. I'm so happy that you found your passion. It's great that you're growing your food. I think everybody should grow food no matter where they're at. They should be growing food. And if you have land, then yeah, you should be growing a lot of food.
Correct.
But let's not hate people because we're trying, like I've gotten personal hate, like you're just creating technology to help control people's lives. I'm like, no, I actually created technology to help let people be set free so that they're not dependent on a system. And I get hate for that. And then I get hate from the algorithm because we're going against, the narrative of
creating
control.
real solutions.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
So-
We were all commiserating, like to try to get the message out in today's world is very, very difficult. And that's why it's cool. Like, we're saying you guys, Allison, myself, I would love to just start creating a community where we're all talking and trying to bring not the fear porn, because you get the other channels that are just like scare you all day long and you burn your brain out.
And the next that you do, it is so it's so discouraging. And it's just like, wow. And
it's not reality.
And that's, like when we did our live yesterday about the FBI picking on MAGA people, and that's very real. And it's terrible. And I certainly don't think that MAGA people are just everyday ham and egg, normal, get up and go to work and pay all the taxes and are paying for all this and funding all this mess. And they just want to live a life and not be harassed by the government.
Left alone. Just leave me alone.
And not like pay to transition kids and all of this woke nonsense. Now we could have stopped and isolated the politics from that and not talked about Trump and be honest. We could have been dishonest or avoided that, but because we did, it gets flushed down the memory hole, because now what YouTube loves is if we were like, if it was all just like,
if we were pro Trump, they would love us.
If
we
were
love us.
It feeds the dialect.
But if we're neither, they hate that.
No, you're normal. You're what the other side calls the normies, right? Well, I'm a normie. I'm a person like we've said it before. It's like we don't agree on everything, and that's okay. That is in fact. That's called actual diversity of thought. And that is a very powerful and strong thing that leads to critical thinking. It leads to a better world because you challenge each other constructively in love. And that's how it's supposed to be. But what they're doing, it's Satan's plan. And he's so smart and so good at it, is just the peeling people into these buckets that are diametrically opposed. And then, as God said, people don't want to hear the word. So they harden their hearts. And even believers, you see them, and it's like, how do we get this message out that we're here, that there are believers who have light in them, who are trying everything that they've been given, either gifts or resource to do, like you guys. You're here and you're fighting the fight. You're on the front line of information. You're distributing, you're disseminating, you're synthesizing data, and you're making it available for people. And you're pushed down because you're a normie. I use that term in affection. Is you're looking at it from multiple angles, and like your two, one that you did on Maui, here's this, and then, well, obviously you had the pushback. So did she lie? And it's like, or with Allison and everything that she's doing, she's very kind of just challenging both narratives, or both sides.
That's what balanced people do.
It is. And for me, when I'm up there trying to say, the things that I've been given passion about is I want to help feed people, but then I get the hate of, these people are lost, and what do you have up? And technology is evil. It's like,
we're how do we each other? It's the dialectic is strong. It's hard. We want to try to punch through that. So let's talk about Eden Grow Systems, and we can wrap up this video by what you're doing, what's currently available, what's next, where can everybody find you? This has been an incredible conversation. And I can tell you right now, like, I vehemently disagree with you on certain eschatological things, but at the same time, we can still communicate and talk, and I can say, and you could say, well, you say that, but this, and this, and here's scriptures, and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, they're very valid, good points, and they're reasonable, they're rational, and I can absolutely see where you're coming from, and I understand, why you're saying that, and that's the way that's the way things used to be.
That's how things happen. Yeah.
Before everything went postmodern, post-truth, and
no, I like having the diversity of thought. So I appreciate disagreement. I when I was at Boeing and in the Air Force, I always said I appreciate true diversity. Meaning, and this is another one of those, bifurcations, is like diversity is this woke thing. Like, no, it's not. No, that's not. So you get the right hand people sitting there going, that's diversity. That's what you're saying. You want purple hair everywhere. I'm like, no, that's not diversity at all. The real diversity is different thinking. And we need that. That's how we were. If God wanted robots that were all exactly the same, he would never have made us.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
right. But as far as like what we're doing is we're trying to create a solution that would allow people to have food independence, meaning that they can start growing their own food no matter where they're at, no matter what the climate is, no matter what your political views of climate is. Food doesn't like to grow when it's really, really hot in Texas in the middle, what is it? The doorstep to hell in August, I guess is what they call it, right? And when you're on the North Shore up in Alaska, it doesn't like to grow up there in the dark, or even if you're in Fargo, or if you're in Saudi Arabia, it doesn't matter, Finland, Sweden, anywhere on the planet, Russia, Ukraine, food doesn't like to grow when the conditions aren't right for it. And what we wanted to do is enable people to live where they live and to be able to grow their own food again, and to start, like, we can't go take an entire garden and offset your entire diet, but we have to start somewhere. So what we've done is created a multi-tiered, meaning a vertical solution. No dirt is required. We found as close to absolutely organic nutrient solutions that go into it as we possibly could. It's the only vertical solution that's out there that does aeroponics and aquaponics, meaning you can raise fish, so you can actually have protein, giant freshwater prawns, not without the Mr. Na in it, as we said in our previous chat, and have that all grown. You can grow the entire spectrum of crops from root vegetables such as potatoes. We actually partner with Texas A&M on that, and we're successfully growing potatoes. You just unzip it, reach in, pull out the potatoes.
Yeah, crazy.
And keep going. You get about three harvests off of it before you got to replant your plant. And and then we've done corn, we've done berries, cucumbers, tomatoes. We've done pepper, all of it. I think we continue to get told okra. I think that's big down there. So we've grown okra. So a lot of those things we can grow, others can't because they can't do root vegetables. We've done carrots, we've done onions, we've done garlic. So you can do all this in something that's 2 feet by 4 feet up to about 6 feet tall. Some of them go up to about 7 feet. And 4 of them, which is the size of a queen size bed, will actually feed one human 2,000 calories every day. And I say it this way because the first thing people think is, well, I'm not eating lettuce all day long, and that's a lot of lettuce. But what I mean is, we eat meals. That's what we eat, But so when I have to give people answers, I have to tell them in calories, because treating a meal is really, really diversified. Like what, salt, pepper, all this different stuff that goes into making a meal. So, but from a caloric standpoint, we can generate all the calories that one human needs in an area of a queen size bed. And that same area would be a salad every day as well, which has cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, kale. I think there's a few other things that we had in there, and you can just harvest every day and just keep taking out of that every day. And we're working on right now, the prices of each tower are $3,000 to $5,000, which I know is high. Everyone's like, oh, well, the reason for that is because we're using aluminum structure. We're not going with plastics. So it's all computer controlled so that you don't have to be there the whole time. The computer does the work for you. So instead of being tied to your garden, we're thinking people in the city don't want to be stuck in their apartment, tending a garden all day long. You need 5 minutes a day to take care of the tower. And that's it. You can go away for weeks at end, and the tower will run itself, and you can monitor it from your smartphone if you want. You don't have to be attached to the internet at all. You can be completely off grid with it. It uses as much energy, a little more energy than less energy than a hair dryer, a little more energy than a refrigerator. It has all the lights built into it, full spectrum. And when you grow, you don't have to use any herbicides or pesticides. You don't have to worry about any pests like moles or rats. If you're in the city, I hear rats is a big deal. You don't have to worry about any of those. You don't have to build any fence. You don't have to move in any manure. You just take a little bag of the nutrient solution, and a bag this big will last you about 4 months. So you can store gallon buckets of it if you're into prepping, and you could be set for years. And then the food that comes off of it, as you guys know, everything's better when it's fresh. So when you take something off our tower, it is the most flavorful food. I even had David over at Adapt 2030. He's like, I've never had lettuce that tastes like this. It's amazing. And it's because we're used to getting the leftovers, in the grocery store, or the old stuff. And what we're trying to do right now, we've sold about 50 towers. We're post revenue as a startup. That's a big deal. And what we're trying to do is raise $1.2 million so that we can do a tower redesign, reduce the cost through purchasing power, and increase our marketing, because the towers we sold so far are just by me talking on YouTube. And we need to be like a company. We need to advertise, and we don't have enough money to do that. And we have a partnership with an organization called Feed the Future, where we have deals potentially in Africa, in some cities, in food deserts right now, also in Mexico, where we're working on negotiating contracts. They're working on the negotiation. We're here to support because our technology can go there. And we're trying to get this idea of food independence back into the narrative of everybody. So I guess the last thing, we're trying to raise the money, so you can go to eatinggrowsystems.com/regcf, and you can actually put money into the company right now and get equity. So it is a crowd fund, but it's not like a Kickstarter where you're like, hey, here's my money and you get a little coin back or something. This is actually, you'll get equity in the company. And we're trying to get this technology out. And then I'm trying to do the whole social media thing and try to find more people who would have me on, and to where we can share this message of like, hey, listen, whatever your politics, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter. You should be growing your own food again. We all need to be growing our own food again. And I don't care if you do it in our system or in a potter you bought at Home Depot. I'm telling you, everybody, you need to start growing your own food again. It is the best thing you could possibly do to help make sure that your future is much more secure. And if I can just get that idea out into the narrative, I know that food security will go up. I know that food availability will go up. And I know that obesity, diabetes, and all those things will start going down. But that's way in the future for us. But we got to start somewhere. All journeys start with that first step, and we're taking that first step.
Well, we appreciate the time and the effort and what you're doing and what you stand for. And I just want to remind everyone that is listening, this is a value for value proposition. So if you do appreciate what we're doing and the information we provide, please go on over to TheTexasBoys.com and check us out. And whatever you need, if we have it over there, you can support us by buying it there. And is there any parting questions or thoughts or anything that you want to talk about, Matt?
Yeah, I would definitely say if you want to support us without spending anything, a great way to support this podcast is just dropping a 5-star review wherever you are listening to us on.
And we are on the Fountain app, so you can also leave us questions. We just had a podcast that was from listener feedback with Samantha. That's how I got connected with her. So we do read our emails and reviews and notes.
Absolutely.
We love the interaction. We appreciate it. We want to really thank Jeff, not just for what he's doing, but for coming on today. And we'll leave the links down below so you can get more information over there at Eden Grow Systems. And remember, y'all, stay fearless, my friends.